Years ago, if a company marketed their game as being long, I would have been excited. But in the modern day, a lengthy game usually means it's just designed around busy work and pointless side quests to pad it all out. CD Projekt Red have confirmed that Cyberpunk will have a shorter main story than The Witcher 3. And the interesting part to this is that they've confirmed that metrics on who actually completed The Witcher 3 main story led to this decision. What could that mean for Cyberpunk, and is the low completion rate of modern games one of the reasons we don't get a whole lot of quality side content anymore? Let's get stuck into that. Hi, Estelden here. The Cyberpunk hype has been around for so long that any little tidbit, any detail at all, is now going to be scrutinised pretty damn heavily. I can tell you that while this news might concern some people, and I'm sure to others it may actually make them pretty happy, what I'll say is I think most people searching for Cyberpunk news simply breathe a sigh of relief when that particular piece of news isn't another delay. So despite what we all might think of this, there's no more delays going on. So Cyberpunk, it looks ready to come out in November, and that is the positive here. I personally don't think this news is a massive deal. I think The Witcher 3, it probably dragged on a little bit in its second half. I do believe that most people's fond memories of the game, they come from questlines like the Bloody Baron, and probably not really the later stuff, and whether that's down to quality, or what CD Projekt Red is saying, and that's that not many people completed the rest of the game, that's hard to say, but I do think the common thought is that the really memorable stuff for most people comes in that first half. To give some quick context to what's been going on, basically a CD Projekt Red designer has come out and said that the Cyberpunk 2077 main story will not be as long as The Witcher 3. The metric they've gone off is an interesting one in making this decision. For anyone who ever checks their achievement list, and that goes for pretty much all platforms now, it used to feel like it was more of a console thing, but now even GOG has achievements, so you really can't escape them. But if you do check them out, especially for big, long RPGs, the completion rate for pretty much any role-playing game is pretty damn low. It certainly saddens me sometimes. I know when I finished Divinity Original Sin and had a look at the numbers of people who'd actually completed it, it was staggeringly low, and it worried me a lot about the future. My fears were null and void though, because the sequel to that game sold extremely well, so that told me that completion time doesn't necessarily seem to be a huge issue when it comes to people buying games. So what is CD Projekt Red's issue here? They officially kind of said it was because people had complained about the main story being too long, but that really isn't something I see all the time, and we all know Cyberpunk is going to sell like wildfire. That is no secret, and I do feel there's more going on than just a few people complaining. I feel like CD Projekt Red themselves obviously feel a 40 to 50 hour main quest is just too long, even for a massive open world RPG, and it's not just about the general feedback. Witcher 3's reviews, the word of mouth, they never really went in the way of people saying, oh look it's good, but it's just too long, so only get it if you like long games. I don't think that's ever really been the case, so I do think it's a different issue with CD Projekt Red. To me it seems they're mainly worried about future content in Cyberpunk. I can tell you it's very easy to find stats on who bought the base game of Witcher 3. Why wouldn't it be? It's a very impressive figure of like 20 plus million. What studio would not want to brag about that? What is a little harder to work out though, and where I do think the issue might lie, is in the performance of DLC and also the spin-off Thronebreaker. DLC has always been tricky for studios, and one of the reasons I assume it's so expensive compared to the base games is that sales are always quite a bit lower for it than the actual base game purchases. What CD Projekt Red might have noticed is that the majority of people who haven't finished the main story of 3 also don't go on to buy the DLC. That makes sense. If you haven't finished the main quest, are you really going to be hungry for additional sequel content? Probably not. You'll tell yourself, oh yeah, I'll go and get it later, I've still got another 20 hours to go in Novigrad first, yeah, look, I'll get onto it. And then it never quite happens. You never finish the game. I think a lot of people fall into that particular boat, and I can appreciate CD Projekt Red's frustration. I don't think it's just a commercial concern either, but also a creative concern. When a developer pours their heart and soul into a bunch of content that players never see, they feel those resources were wasted and they could have gone elsewhere. Another RPG, Elix, a game which has a sequel potentially coming out quite soon, and I actually did a video on that very recently, please check it out if you want to hear more. A developer on that title actually mentioned an awesome questline they created, which was a little bit secretive, a little bit hard to solve. They felt they'd wasted time making that because the completion rate of it was just a bit low. and that same developer actually said it was their favourite quest, so I can imagine she was probably feeling like those resources could have been allocated to another area of the game that needed improving. These appear to me to be the main reasons behind the shorter Cyberpunk main story. And I have seen some people raise concern and say that it could mean the main story is going to be lower quality, but I really wouldn't think so. At least I wouldn't say that's the actual reason that would happen. For me, most of the time, quality is better than quantity, and I defend this decision as someone who is by no means a Cyberpunk fanboy. I have concerns about the RPG credentials of this game. I worry it's going to try and target the more mainstream GTA and Ubisoft crowd more so than the people who love the RPG side of The Witcher 3. But to me, this is not necessarily a negative, the main story being shorter. The one caveat I have for that, though, is that it is shorter for the right reasons, not just because they want to streamline it or something like that. I did touch on Thronebreaker earlier too, and I do believe it backs up the point about why they've made this decision. That game had notably poor sales, and from memory it was meant to be like a GOG exclusive on PC, and they quite quickly moved it to Steam to try and give it some attention. It just wasn't getting any. Obviously that's a fairly different genre and it is a lot more niche, but I do have to wonder if the poor sales again were due to plenty of people having not finished Witcher 3 and figuring it's something they'll play once they get that done with, but then it just never happens. They never actually finish the story. What I will say though is while I don't care too much about Cyberpunk having a shorter main plot, I do get concerned about publishers and developers designing games around all of these different metrics. Something I've noticed in the last decade or so is that side content has gotten considerably worse with so many different series. Often they'll seem to know that most people only play like the first 10 hours of the main story, stop playing it, and then they don't do much side content at all. What that then means is they'll shove a ton of big set pieces and exciting stuff into the first half of the campaign, and everything else feels like a bit of an afterthought, and that's because they want everyone to see that. They want the reviewers to see it, they want the casual audience to see it too and tell all their friends, so they go out and buy the game, but then anything past that, the real meaty stuff towards the end, sometimes it's quite non-existent. If you look at a game such as Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the side stuff always seems to boil down to all of the same activities. Clear a settlement, kill a big bear, do another fetch quest. Then you look at the main story and they've shoved a lot of the big moments, and I'd say like 90% of the budget, all into that main quest. And I do think that actually relates back to why people enjoyed The Witcher 3 so much. It very much was that side content that a lot of people really enjoyed and really got engrossed into. I don't want to say that all of it was good. I mean, I could have done without all those question marks around the map. A lot of those were very repetitive, like the monster holes. They just seemed like they were copy and pasted. But there were a good number of side quests to find, and modern gaming has really lacked that in a number of ways recently. What I'm hoping for is that CD Projekt Red know this. They know plenty of people appreciated that side quest quality, and so the plan is to spread out a lot more content into standalone adventures outside the main quest. And that way, if you do want that extra long adventure and you want to find interesting stories along the way, they will be there. They just won't all be tied to the main story. I think in terms of length, people do need to be a little bit more realistic as well, because historically, the more shooter-focused games in the RPG genre, games like Mass Effect, Deus Ex, so those real sci-fi-esque titles similar to Cyberpunk, I'd say, at least in style, they're very rarely the 80-plus hour blockbusters that we've gotten with Witcher 3 and games like Baldur's Gate 2. Why is that? Well, I imagine it might partly come down to modern setting just taking longer to design. For instance, in Witcher 3, when you're outside towns, you're mostly exploring forests. I'm sure it's much easier to reuse and develop large areas of trees and woods in comparison to a brand new street in Cyberpunk. We already know the map size is going to be a bit smaller in Cyberpunk compared to Witcher, and given that is the case, quests might be trickier to design as well, given it's much easier to design a quest around like going into the forest to kill one big monster, compared to the equivalent in Cyberpunk, which I'd say would probably be going to like a warehouse and killing a whole bunch of people. And if you were doing that, you would need to design probably a building potentially, you'd need to design the area around that building, cover for when you're shooting these enemies, so it makes sense with the level design. And then this area also needs to be placed intelligently on the map, so much more time consuming, I would say, than just placing a monster in the woods and using the Witcher 3 gameplay loops. For me, length, map size, all of those things, they don't really bother me at all. I am after quality here. I'm not necessarily after quantity unless we can get both, but that's always very rare, so I'm going to focus on one, given there's no guarantees. If I was being cynical here, And it's only due to recent worries I've had with CD Projekt Red, given Cyberpunk is very clearly targeting that mainstream market in ways I don't think The Witcher 3 was. Even hardcore fans seem to have been a little bit concerned at certain points that it does have that GTA feel, especially with the map design. And I've got to say, I was really hoping when we started getting more news about this game a few years ago, I was so much hoping that it was going to be a Deus Ex successor, but I do think that ship might have sailed now. I don't think it's going to be quite that. That cynical side of me, though, does worry that the game could be shorter in order to sell more DLC, and there's always a chance that main story arcs have been split into the DLC, and that's always a bit of a possibility. So we need to keep that in mind before simply cheering that this is a good thing. I do think regardless of the publisher or the developer, we always need to remain skeptical, and not just cheer from the rafters because it's CD Projekt Red. Another concern I have relates to the multiplayer. I don't ever really plan to play the multiplayer side of the game all too much, but I've had a worry for a little while that they've seen the success of GTA Online and they feel they can replicate that in Cyberpunk. I'm really concerned that the actual map we've seen of the game could be designed not just for the single player experience, but also the multiplayer, meaning we won't be playing something that is completely designed around the campaign. I know the multiplayer isn't going to be out for a while, but they could still be laying the groundwork now for that, so it is something we need to keep in mind. All the microtransaction discussion has been quite intriguing as well. I do think it's a little bit sneaky from CD Projekt Red to be trying to win PR points by talking about, oh, we're going to have none of them in the game, but then you include them in the multiplayer because it's technically a different product, a little bit of a loophole there. If it was just a random studio or developer, I really wouldn't care that much, since that to me would just be business as usual. I've seen all that nonsense all before. But CD Projekt have been riding pretty high on that good guy image, so I do believe they deserve a bit of scrutiny there. I do think that a lot of people who only play AAA games seem to think that they're like these wonderful angels, these saviors from above. They don't care about money, they just want to deliver great games. If you're looking for people who do that, go and play some of the great indie titles out there from really small studios or 1-2 man teams. There's loads of them, but you're backing the wrong horse for CD Projekt Red if you think they are a fastly growing business looking to make money any way possible. You're barking up the wrong tree if you think that the suits there have the same priorities as just an indie developer who wants to make like the next great game in his favourite genre. One of the big differences with CD Projekt and some of the other big publishers like EA and Activision is CD Projekt, they've played the PR game extremely well. And right now they are trying to deliver high quality products to ensure they have the best reputation in the industry. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're bad or anything. I think they're really great in many ways, but I also feel we need to look at things objectively and look at them nice and neutrally. So there it is, November's the month we'll find out if Cyberpunk is a genuine RPG or if it's just a GTA with some RPG elements slapped on. And we'll also find out if they've opted for quality over quantity. System requirements are out, and the good news for me is it doesn't look like I'm gonna need to upgrade. I can probably put that off until next year. Not that it'd matter though, I mean I've got no chance of getting an RTX 3080 before then. I mean, Jesus Christ, that launch was an absolute farce. Unless you're a scalper, of course. I mean, in that case, you're probably living rich right now, you're living the dream. But the rest of us, we've certainly been screwed. November is going to creep on us pretty quickly, and I'm excited for this game overall. I think at the end of the day, even if it doesn't meet my RPG expectations, I'm sure there's probably still going to be a lot of fun to be had. I'm sure that CD Projekt Red, they are going to craft a pretty well-polished, quality game in a lot of ways, and I think there's going to be a lot of great quests in there. There should be some pretty decent choice and consequence, at least at some parts, and we'll just have to see how it all pans out. So, hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.